Little review of simplifying radicals or performing square roots. And as we go further into this, we'll be doing other kinds of radicals as well. But just as a refresher, let's just go over things you may already know. Some of the basic square roots that you may know. Square root of 1 equals 1. Square root of 4 equals 2. Square root of 9 equals 3. Square root of 16 equals 4. Square root of 25 equals 5. Hopefully you're seeing the pattern here. Square root of 36 equals 6. Square root of 49 equals 7. 64 equals 8. 81 equals 9. And square root of 100 equals 10. Hopefully those are all, you have them memorized, you know them. Now when you're simplifying radicals, your goal is to find these perfect squares. And they're not always very evident, and you have to sometimes do some digging to find them. But once you find these, you want to convert them right to a regular number. And that process of taking the square root of 16 to get to 4, you lose the radical. So a lot of times we'll see things like, student says square root of 16 equals the square root of 4. Well, what they did was they took the square root of 16, put a 4 here, but then they kept the radical. Again, you don't do that. Square root of 16 is just plain old naked 4. So make sure when you take a square root of a number, you just put down the base there and don't have a radical again on it. Okay. All right. So let's try some basic ones here and then a couple of simpler or more complex ones as we go. And the next video we'll delve into some other types for next time. So here's a couple of really simple ones. Things I just covered with you. Square root of 25 equals 5. There's no work to be shown. Square root of 64 is 8. Square root of 144, maybe you don't always know that one, is 12. The one I always had trouble remembering in high school, even to this day, is 11 squared. I think it's 121. So the square root of 121 equals 11. That just doesn't stick for me. Now, things that get a little more complex. As I said earlier, you want to find the perfect squares. You need to look for these, but they're not always jumping out in front of you. So you go to the next section here, and they have some example of square root of 32. Well, hey man, 32 is not on my list. Here's 25, here's 36, so somewhere in between. So the answer is not here. But you got to decide if you can find a perfect square in here. So if I look at 32, and I know that's made up of the products of, these things, this is the work part of it. This equals square root of 16 times 2. I took the 32, broke it down to 16 times 2. Why did I pick those? Well, I'm simplifying radicals, and I know that 16 is a perfect square. Now here's the next step. Notice they're both under one radical. I can now split the radical. The 16 is under the radical, so is the 2. So I can write it as square root of 16 times the square root of 2. And then the next step, hopefully, is obvious for you. Square root of 16, plain old 4, square root of 2. And that's the answer. That's a simplified radical version of the square root of 32. You find the perfect squares. Next example is 54. Well, let's see. I think 9 times 6, 9 being a perfect square. So again, a larger radical with 9 times 6, just 9 times 6 is 54. 54 is under the radical, 9 times 6 is under the radical. If I now split the radical, I have square root of 9 times square root of 6. And one of the things I also want to mention to you is try to put the perfect square first, because it then becomes, this 9 will become a 3. Square root of 6 isn't going anywhere. There's the answer. Let's try a few others that are on here. Let's try square root of 48. Again, I'm trying to find a perfect square for my list. Now this list is nice to have laying around. I won't give it to you. But if you need to have it written down someplace, write it down and you can look for the numbers. I think 16 goes into 48. I think it's 3 times. So I would write, again, the larger radical is 16 times 3 under the radical. Split the radical. And square root of 16 is 4 and 3. So take some practice. You've got to go, look for these. And some of them aren't always so obvious. One more, just to show you. Square root of 150. Big number. Which of these numbers might go into into 1/5. I think 25 goes into that. So this would be equal to, in the larger square root, 25, I guess it's times 6. Split the radical. Oops, sorry. Split the radical of square root of 25 times the square root of 6. That becomes your 5 square root of 6. Can't do anything with that, let it alone. All right, folks, good luck.